Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning. Thank you. And hello and welcome to everyone joining us online. We know there is a diverse and varied community across Europe who are joining us. So welcome to the opening day of the 2024 EPALE Community Conference. It's organized in cooperation with the Italian National Support Service, and we are broadcasting live from Bologna, Italy, in the beautiful Auditorium Salaborsa, which is a library. I am joined by speakers and a live audience of the EPALE community members from all across Europe, and it's going to be a fantastic agenda. So, for the next 3 days, what are we talking about? We are reflecting the 3 focal themes for the EPALE community this year. So day 1, that's today, we are talking about upskilling and reskilling for the digital transition. Tomorrow, we're going to build on that and explore how adult learning is a pathway out of poverty and into economic integration and economic opportunity. And on the 3rd day, we're going to explore the role of sustainability. We're going to challenge ourselves to think about how we do things differently, how in our practice and our everyday life choices we can support sustainability. Today, our focus is on digital literacy as a key element of citizen empowerment, and we're going to explore some really big issues. Who makes the rules in the digital world? Who should have the right to decide what we can and can't say in the digital space? How do these rules extend to society as a whole? And how do these decisions affect our identities, our ability to build communities, and our participation in society? So those are really big questions we're going to tackle today. It's an exciting morning. And just to let you know, we are part of the 6 days of the Erasmus Days that run from the 14th to the 19th of October. That's 6 days of celebration, because the Erasmus Plus program is the most recognized and perhaps well-beloved of all EU funding programs. We know that every year more than 1 million Europeans participate and benefit from a learning mobility opportunity, a chance to go to another country, another culture, to expand their mind and their life experience. And we're proud to be part of that tradition and to play a role in it. We have a fantastic agenda, but you have to make it a smash hit. That's through your active participation. Now, if you're watching us online, and we know that we may have more than 1,000 people joining us at any one time, you need to sign up to the EPALE platform, because that's how you can interact with us. You can send comments and you can ask questions through a range of social channels. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, and on X. And I'm not alone in moderating this. I'm delighted to introduce my colleague, Sara Zeleri. She's part of the online audience, and she is the bridge, your voice here in the room. She'll be sharing what she's seeing, what we're hearing from our online audience. So Sara links the virtual with the real for us. So thank you for doing that. I also want to give a big shout out to the national support services of Croatia, French-speaking parts of Belgium, Serbia, Lithuania, Iceland, Italy, Spain, Ireland, Cyprus, Latvia, North Macedonia, Greece, Germany, and the Netherlands. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Why are we clapping them? It's because they have decided to add value to our community conference by organizing in local languages side events linked to this. So to build on the momentum in their own countries about what's happening around these key topics of adult learning. And today, there's the events we're highlighting is in the Belgian French-speaking community, Italy, Ireland, and Greece. Their side events are taking place today, and we will have a live link up both to the Italy event and to colleagues in Greece. You can find out more if you go to our conference page, and you'll see the information. For those of you watching online, it will be on screen. So that's the background. That's why we're here. We also fit within a broader policy agenda of the European Union, which has got a clear vision on where they want to go with skills. So now we're going to watch a video message from the European Commissioner with responsibility for the sector, Mrs. Ilana Ivanova. Let's watch her message.
Dear friends of the electronic platform for adult learning in Europe, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to extend my warmest greetings as you convene for this community conference in Bologna's historic Salaborsa and online. And I congratulate you on reaching 150,000 members this year. This achievement is a testament to the work of the EPALE community. The individual stories of your adult learning experiences continue to inspire. Stories about individuals like Ruth, a first aid instructor passing on life-saving knowledge in Estonia, or Lucia, an Erasmus Plus ambassador building collaborations between community workers, teachers, and trained psychologists in Italy, or entire communities in Denmark and Sweden working to promote education as a way out of poverty. This conference is the sum of thousands of those experiences, and it emphasizes adult learning's place at the center of the European education area. For me, adult learning is first and foremost a tool of empowerment for teachers and learners alike. And it is so heartening to hear testimonies from educators in adult learning who have found that in teaching they themselves continue to learn and grow. Entire communities benefit from your commitment to adult learning. Bringing digital literacy to people who find themselves cut off from modern society, highlighting the importance of sustainability in our cities, and coming together to lay the foundations for the future of adult learning. So thank you for your dedications. Congratulations on your achievements and my best wishes for the success of this community conference.
So we heard from the Commissioner just a few examples of the amazing range of things that are happening all across Europe. And adult learning happens in a variety of contexts and in different environments. And we'll hear more about that today. But the next person who's going to give us some input is Anne Branch. She is the head of unit at DG Employment, which is the part of the European Commission that deals with this sector. And her specific responsibilities, she leads the work on the EU skills agenda. And of course, that's key to what we're doing here in adult learning. So let's have our connection to Anne Branch. Hello, Anne. Welcome to the Salaborsa in Bologna. I hand you the virtual floor.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you to EPALE. It's really my pleasure to welcome you at the EPALE Community Conference on behalf of DG Employment. And we're really glad to see your community growing stronger and gathering during these 3 days. And it's really impressive that your platform is now available in 32 languages. And also, very importantly, that you're co-created by your community, with some 70% on average of your content being produced by regular users. And also the large number of different ways you have to inspire and connect adult educators from all around Europe is also truly inspiring, including your 2024 edition of Community Stories, which collected an impressive 92 stories from 27 countries. So we'd like to congratulate you, dear members of the EPALE community, for your hard work on adult learning and strengthening the adult learning profession. Now, quality adult learning and training, to which you're all contributing, is all the more important in light of the challenges we're currently facing. The transformation of jobs and work and the green and digital transitions have heightened the relevance of learning throughout our entire lives. And indeed, the incredible pace of technological change means that jobs or occupations for life will largely be a thing of the past for most people. So the world where people would get their education largely over when they were young, with perhaps a bit of training along the way in working life, is a thing of the past. And indeed, if we stop and think about it, once people finish their formal education now, most adults will spend some 40 to 50 years in the workforce. And it's mind-boggling to try to think how much will change in the world of work during this kind of time span. So people need to be equipped for this. People need to upskill and reskill their entire lives. And this makes your field, adult learning, more important than ever. And also it will really be crucial for everyone. However, the situation is quite worrying. Now, member states agree on the importance of boosting adult learning. And so an EU headline target was set for 2030. And the goal is for 60% of adults across Europe to take part in training every year by 2030. However, we see that we're still far from that across the EU. So in 2022, the latest figures we have, EU adult participation in learning stood at only 39.5%. And what's particularly worrying is that it's especially low for those who need it most, so that low qualified, older people and those outside the labour force. Now, the green and digital transitions offer great opportunities for quality job creation, but of course, people need to be given the support and be empowered to seize these opportunities. Now, recently, you may have seen that the Letta and Draghi reports underlined the importance of the skills challenge and the key role of skills to the EU's sustainable competitiveness, as well as people's well-being and prosperity. And they both recognise the value and relevance of EU initiatives in the adult learning field, such as the recommendation on individual learning accounts, the recommendation on micro-credentials, as well as the decision to hold a dedicated European year on skills, which ran for a year until May this year. However, they also stress that further efforts are needed. We need to step up efforts for those who are furthest from the labour market and to tackle problems such as the challenge of the low level of basic skills, which if people don't get when they're at school, risks burdening them throughout their entire lives. So all of the evidence highlights a greater urgency to provide more adult learning, upskilling and reskilling opportunities to individuals. Now, looking ahead, what's positive is that we already know that skills will remain in the spotlight at the EU level. You'll probably have seen that in her political guidelines for the next European Commission, President von der Leyen stated that Europe needs a radical step change in ambition and action for all skill levels and for all types of training and education. And that this is as important for people's careers and prospects as it is for our competitiveness. And she also indicated that we'll establish a union of skills. So work will therefore begin on all of this with the new Commission. You'll also have seen that on the 17th of September, the President unveiled the new members of the College of Commissioners and their mission letters were made public. So you'll have seen them, I'm sure. Now, regarding our Commissioner designate, Executive Vice President Minsatu, we feel it's significant that skills have been promoted to the headline of her portfolio. The full title is People, Skills and Preparedness. And interestingly, during the European Year of Skills, we heard many calls that we need a Commissioner for Skills. And now the Commission proposes to have one, and with the status of an Executive Vice President. So that's a very positive development. And as I said, and as I mentioned, the Union of Skills, she has been tasked explicitly, amongst other things, to develop this Union of Skills. As part of this, she's been asked to design an overarching strategy focusing on investment, adult and lifelong learning, vocational education and training, skills retention and recognition, and enhancing skills intelligence. But also she's been asked to ensure that it's a collective and inclusive project, including all stakeholders across government, education and business. I think also importantly for some of the work you're looking at your event is that her mandate is also to lead work to implement the European Pillar of Social Rights, including delivering quality jobs, more equality and lifting more people out of poverty. And this will include developing a quality jobs roadmap together with the social partners to ensure a just transition for all. And she'll also lead work on the first ever EU anti-poverty strategy aimed at helping people to access the essential protection and services they need and addressing the root causes of poverty. So you can see there's a strong social inclusion dimension to her portfolio, and we will of course seek to ensure synergies between topics and our common interests. So as you can see, we're expecting to have some new items on the agenda, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we continue building on existing actions. And we will definitely draw on the lessons from the European Year of Skills. And I'd like to say a few words about that. Now, the year was a tremendous opportunity to generate political momentum, to work together with stakeholders, and to raise awareness on the importance of changing mindsets and building a real lifelong learning culture. The year, it was in fact a massive conversation of skills with a vast variety of diverse stakeholders, which really enabled a rich exchange of views and mutual learning in many different events. And it really gave us valuable lessons and insights for our future efforts on skills policy, including the Union of Skills. And it really highlighted just how crucial skills are to every economic sector. Now, the success of the year is a result of our collective effort. It was only such a success because of all our stakeholders, how they mobilized. And we know that many of you in the audience here today contributed enormously. So thank you for your engagement. We're confident that the year will have a legacy, and we're preparing a report on its implementation, which will come out in the first half of next year. But let me already share a few elements. Now, in terms of the scale, over 2,000 events took place across Europe. And at the EU level, there were 190 initiatives, which really shows the EU's commitment to addressing skills gaps and promoting a culture of up and reskilling. And the messages of the year's communication activities, which were aimed at the broader public, so beyond stakeholders, literally reached tens of millions of people and businesses, again, emphasizing the importance of skills development. So, for example, our videos received 90 million views on YouTube and Twitch, and our social media adverts reached 69 million people through various platforms. All of this stimulating conversation and action on skills development. But I think also importantly, beyond the numbers, we also ran a qualitative survey which showed that the messages had reached people, had had an impact, for example, making them think about taking up some kind of learning. Of course, this was good, but efforts need to continue. Skills is, we need, our outgoing commissioner said that we need a decade of skills, not just a year of skills, but in fact, we'll always need skills. And so our work needs to carry on. So I'd like to thank you again for your work on EPALE, for all your input to the European Year of Skills and on adult learning in general. You really play a critical role in bringing the adult learning community together and enabling a Europe-wide sharing of information, resources, and good practices. So as in the next days, you'll be looking into 3 important topics on the digital transition, adult learning as a way out of poverty, and adult learning for sustainable development. And we'll be following your discussions with great interest and also drawing lessons from them. So just to conclude, I just wish to finish by again stressing the importance of stakeholder engagement in this domain. Skills, adult learning, they're a shared responsibility between the EU, national, regional and local level, between the public and private spheres, with social partners and many stakeholders. And we can only deliver real change if we join forces and work in partnership. So we look forward to working with you in the coming period. As you can see, skills and adult and lifelong learning have been put high on the agenda of the next Commission, and we look forward to joining forces to develop a real union of skills. And thank you, and I wish you an interesting event.
Thank you very much, Anne, both for reminding us about the European Year of Skills last year and how much momentum and energy that created. I did some quick maths in my head. 2,000 events, 365 days a year. That sounds like, we were sort of 7 or 8 events every day throughout the whole year. So clearly there was a lot of momentum that was generated. And our task is to take that energy and move it forward and keep it going. So We are here, as I said, in this amazing environment in the Salaborsa, which is right next to the City Hall in Bologna. And we're organizing this conference under the aegis of the municipality of Bologna. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Annalisa Boni, a councillor of the municipality of Bologna, to give us a welcome. Annalisa.
Thank you very much. Tamsin is an old friend. It's really nice to find people that come back to your life like this. It's really nice. But anyway, so welcome to Bologna, yes, to Salaborsa, but especially to the city of Bologna. Maybe some of you are discovering it for the first time. Who knows? Who's here for the first time? Okay, quite a few then. So you have to come back. Because unless you're staying for the weekend. No, but I hope you're going to have a good time, and I'm very happy that you're here, and I'm very proud that actually you've chosen Bologna as the city to have these days, or actually this day, because the rest I know it's online. So this event, this important moment of such an energetic process, as you said, because, we have, of course, we have a famous university, we all know, where there is a lot of knowledge, formal education, and so on. But we are also famous for other things. We are famous for, solidarity, for welcoming people, for including people. I don't know if you've noticed, at the enter of our door, the main gate to come inside the municipality, which is next to the Salaborsa entrance, it's written Bolognesi dal primo giorno. So you Bologna people from the first day when you were born. As you know, in Italy, there is no ius soli. So the kids, the children that are born from parents that are not Italians, they cannot be Italian. So they have to wait to be 18 to make a request and so on. So as a symbolic way of feeling everyone integrated and welcome in our city, in our society, we have decided to put in our statutes the principle of the ius soli. So all the kids, all the children that have parents that are not Italians, but that have the kids that are going to school here, that live here, that are born here, and so on, we give them a symbolic citizenship, a honorary citizenship. So for us, this means that, it's really important that, that there is solidarity, that there is inclusion, that there is participation. It's our DNA, in a way, as a city with a big C, but also as a city with a small c. And that's why, organizations like Momo or others in the city are, many, they are active, and they are creating also this kind of climate and, as I say, DNA. So I like the title you've given to the conference, Forward. I think it's really spot on. Why? Because it's about looking at the future, right? And it's about making sure that we're all fit for the future, that we're all fit for the challenges that are there today. They are so complex, they are so integrated, they are so cross-cutting, they are on so many levels. We go from, technology, as we say, digital, to social, to the economy, to culture, to the environment and climate. I mean, we are, cities that more specifically are absolutely crossroads for these challenges. And, having to deal with them means also having the ability to have a bigger picture of all that, and not sector-driven policies and so on. And that's what we are trying to look at. So for me, being skilled, being fit for the future means not only technologically speaking, because now we only talk about AI and so on. It's also about being fit in terms of human capital, in terms of skills, in terms of ability to leave no one behind. So that's for me, that's for us a really important priority. And it's also about being able to work across levels of governance. And I understand here there is also the national level, the European, the national, the local. And it's so important that everyone works towards the same objective, hand in hands. It's not so easy, of course, in so many levels. I'm not talking about this specific, but in general, there's a strong need to be really all coordinated and working together. So, you know, learning, having skills, acquiring skills, including people through skills, for me, is the best weapon. You know, I use this word on purpose because, you know, we are overwhelmed by conflicts. And so having, you know, it's the best weapons to have to be, to face these, you know, this polycrisis, this complexity, and therefore having the strength to overcome challenges and inequalities and all the problems and the crisis we have, and turn them into opportunities. So skills are so central for that. So I would like to thank EPALE, how do you call it? We can say it in many ways, EPALE, if it's African maybe. No, I'm joking. But so thanks to the whole community, institutional, non-institutional, civil society, the people that have, the participants in all those events and training, not trainings, I mean education events and so on, learning events that have taken place, so many thousands, and you know, all these people. And I just want to conclude with giving a different acronym to EPALE. So I thought about E for extraordinary. I mean, you have such a platform. When I heard the numbers, 150,000 people having benefited from what you have offered is amazing. And also the sort of, you know, numbers that you turned out, you know, around this EPALE. So extraordinary. P of people. It's really a people-driven, people-centered project. We are so, I mean, at least in Bologna, but many cities that are, you know, having to spend the recovery funds. I'm in charge of these funds at the moment as deputy mayor. And so it's so, you know, it's so good not to hear only about infrastructures. You know, we have building sites all over the city. I'm sure you will experience, if you haven't already, you know, disruptions because of infrastructural transformations, but people are the, you know, the main point. For all. So accessibility to all. This platform seems really something that allows everyone to be part of the game and to acquire so important skills that, as I said, are the best weapons to face the world. And L for liberty. You mention it, freedom. I mean, libertà, I said in Italian. Because if you know things, if you learn things, you are free. Yeah, you are freer in any case, and you have more possibilities to thrive. And finally, E, I take this from your last words, energy. I mean, you can feel it, you can touch it when you come into the room. You heard it from Anne Brand from the Commission. I can hear it, I can feel it, and it's amazing. So thank you very much for being here, and have a good day full of fruitful works. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annalisa, for giving us a new acronym for EPALE. I'm sure we're going to use that. Extraordinary people for all, liberty and energy. What a great way to start the day. And of course, I first met Annalisa 25 years ago when she represented the city of Bologna in Brussels. So she was bringing Bologna to the European affairs, and today she's in Bologna bringing the European affairs. So it's a circle. We come back to it again. So now I promised you we would have a little bit of insight to some of the amazing programs that are being organized as side events by national support services connected to these 3 days of EPALE. And we'll start by hearing from colleagues here in Italy who are going to share what they're doing. So let me invite on stage Lorenza Venturi, Alessandra Ceccarelli, Daniela Ermini, Martina Blasi, Giacomo Scarzanella. Welcome.
Thank you very Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's very exciting for us to be here today. And thank you also the CSS for organizing every year such an interesting conference. There's always so much food of thoughts during these days. And yes, we are going to organize a side event which will take place in the afternoon here. And the topic we have chosen for this workshop we're going to have is how to foster critical thinking in adults through philosophy. So why did we choose this topic? So what is it, critical thinking? We think that in this specific time, it's very, very important to be able to develop our critical thinking, so that it is truly a life skill. So we wanted to stress that. And what about philosophy? So what is the link between critical thinking and philosophy? Philosophy isn't it something very abstract, something that it's not concrete? And that's the point of our workshop. So we will demonstrate and will show us, thanks to the help of some researchers from our institute, how philosophy can help you develop this critical thinking and be more independent and be self-conscious. And this is especially important today with the internet, with artificial intelligence. So, and it's crucial for young people as well for adult people. So if you are interested and if you are curious, come stay here to our workshop. And we also hope to make this connection at European level. So we hope in the next months and the next years to be able to export this kind of model of applying philosophy to critical thinking also in Europe. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you later on today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That is indeed a challenge. I'm curious how you take philosophy, which, as you say, is it's abstract concepts, it's big ideas, and make it practical and help people understand how the fundamental basis of critical thinking is an understanding of philosophical concepts, like who we are and what does that mean and what's our relationship to the world. So that's going to be a great workshop, and I congratulate the NSS Italy for developing it. So now we've come to the key moment of the day because we have a keynote address. And let me invite to join me up on stage Gillian York. Gillian is a writer and activist whose work examines the impact of technology on our societal and our cultural values. She's based in Berlin, and she is the Director for International Freedom of Expression at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. She's also a fellow for the Center for Internet and Human Rights at the European University of Viadrina, and a visiting professor at the College of Europe at Nathalin. And even more importantly, she's a published author of Silicon Values, The Future of Free Speech Under Surveillance Capitalism, that was published in 2021. So welcome, Gillian.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the title of our interaction is called Free Expression in an Increasingly Digitalized World. Now, you and I are going to start our conversation, and then at a certain point, I'm going to open the floor to you who are here in the audience and also to our online platform. And Sarah is here. She is watching all your comments and your questions that are coming in online, and I will invite her to share your perspectives a little bit later. So feel free when you're listening to note down a question and be ready when we get to it. So Gillian, let's start with this. So, your title is about freedom of expression, but how do we define that? And is there a difference between free speech and freedom of expression?
Sure. No, it's a great question. Let me grab my notes again. So for me, the difference is not fundamental. Freedom of speech and freedom of expression are often used interchangeably, as we know. But to me, freedom of expression is broader. It encompasses not just speech, but all forms of expression, whether we're talking about political expression, personal expression of identity. So as it's framed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the accompanying ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Always good to remember your acronyms. Freedom of expression is guaranteed regardless of frontiers. So we're not just talking about speech, the press, we're also talking about how we identify, how we access information, whether that's in the media, online, or wherever. So regardless of medium. But although these are ultimately used synonymously, they're often invoked differently. For me, when we hear freedom of speech, we're often today hearing it in these really negative contexts. I think about, for example, Elon Musk and how he's invoked this to talk about, opening a platform, Twitter in this case, or X, to host some really horrible speech. So we'll get into that a little bit too. Whereas when I think about freedom of expression, I think about the way that it's invoked as a universal concept globally around the world.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful to distinguish between the two, because as you say, they tend to get mixed up. And there is a difference. So let me sort of ask a different question. Does this, right of expression and having to fight and defend that, does that concept still make sense in the modern digital world when it's so easy to communicate, to find an audience? You've got a phone, off you go. There's the platforms out there. Why do we have to fight to defend the right of expression?
Yeah, so it's true. I mean, we're inundated by so much information every day. I mean, sometimes it feels like it's too much. But I think it's also really important to remember that states around the world, including within Europe, are still restricting speech in a number of different ways, and that platforms are often doing so as well, and both in cooperation with governments and states, but also of their own volition. So when I think about this, I'm thinking today about the political speech that's being censored or restricted, however you want to frame it, by platforms, including political expression, information about conflict areas, but also things like certain types of educational information as well. And so it is really important that we continue to fight for freedom of expression, because there are people, maybe not in our societies necessarily, but there are people all over the world who don't have the same access that we do. And that, sort of creates an unlevel playing field, both for personal and political expression, but also for access to information and education.
Thank you. And maybe we can sort of stay on this topic just for a second to explore the difference again between freedom of expression, which is, also partly about identities. It's not just what we say and where we go, it's how we dress, how we identify, how we present ourselves to the world. The difference between that and the digital sphere, where pretty much anyone can say anything about any topic that they like. And how is this really important to understand that we as individuals are not just what we say, we're also, how we choose our gender identity on our clothes and what we choose to wear and how we choose to associate ourselves, whether we choose to accept cultural norms or not. Just maybe we can just open that up a little bit more.
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, I think that this is where I would push back on the idea that anyone can say whatever they want, because marginalized groups are disproportionately censored both by state actors and by these platforms. I can give a couple of examples here. When we're looking at, gender identity, for example, platforms do actually disproportionately restrict the speech and expression, of course, of people who identify in different ways across the LGBTQI spectrum. This is, apparent when we're talking about speech related to the way that sexual content is restricted, for instance. We see that LGBTQIA people are restricted, more so than heterosexual people. We see this in restriction to the way that mothers have been, in relation to the way that mothers have been restricted historically on these platforms, in the way that they, for example, feed their children. So I think that it's really important to note that more marginalized and vulnerable identities do face a different type of restriction than those of us that don't identify that way.
Okay, thank you. So you've just touched on it a little bit, but let's explore, what are the new threats to our freedom of expression? And, across Europe, we have, a tradition that our modern societies have developed often as a response to previous restrictions. And I'm thinking about, you know, many of our European countries were shaped by a battle, a dialogue between the state and the church. You know, there was religious persecution, and instead we've developed what we consider to be freedom of expression and tolerance. So that if those were what we recognize as threats to freedom of expression, what are the new threats? Where should we be looking for the dangers? And therefore, if we're looking for them, we can tackle them and we can see them coming.
Absolutely. I mean, as you said, you know, historically, we've looked at states and religious bodies as the censors. And I think that what's changed is who has the power to restrict our expression. I mean, it is sort of a complex thing to look at, because we are looking at these platforms as places where just about anyone can express themselves. But in reality, as I've said, the restrictions that platforms place are often not in line with universal values. They're not in line with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ICCPR, and other human rights-related treaties, or as I think I've forgotten to mention, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which are supposed to provide a framework for these platforms and how they operate. And so what's different about this, when we look at the way that platforms and other online spaces can restrict our speech, you know, historically, when I've talked about this, a lot of people have come to me and said, well, you know, that doesn't really matter. These are private corporations. They can do what they want. But different from how states have restricted speech, when platforms do it, it's often done without any accountability, any transparency, and the content that we're talking about is simply disappeared. There are also a lot of what I would say sort of shadow restrictions outside of regulatory frameworks, whereby people in certain countries can't access, you know, like I said, the same types of information and educational information that the rest of us can. And so I think that, you know, for me, it's looking at these corporate online spaces. To me, they're the new threat to our freedom of expression.
Thank you. And so again, this is quite interesting, because we've talked historically about how the control of public spaces to express yourself and for free speech was largely controlled in the past by state or by government. They controlled the public space. And now we've got a lot of this digital space, which is largely controlled by private interests, where they set the rules. And often we're told, well, hey, you get this stuff for free. You have an account for free. We're giving you a place to do it. You have to abide by our rules. But when it was a public space governed by states, we had an accountability mechanism. There was some sense of democratic control. But over these, you know, privately controlled domains and spaces, there isn't any of that. So, and you've highlighted that that's a threat. That's something we should be keeping an eye on. But is there anything in between? There's the sort of public space where we've got the democratic control, and that's what governments, and they're supposed to make sure there's equality and inclusion. And then we've got the private space where they make the rules. Is there anything between? Should we look for something else, or should we ask the state to control the private spaces? What's the best mechanism here?
Yeah, so I mean, we are starting to see these regulatory frameworks emerge. In Europe, of course, we have the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, which do seek to govern these spaces. We're still seeing how they'll be implemented, so I think it's, you know, not really a done deal in what that will look like. But outside of Europe, these are really patchy frameworks. I'm concerned, for example, about the ways that other countries have tried to copy some of the European frameworks in ways that are a little bit more troublesome. So, you know, the quasi-public sphere, as I've called it in the past, is sort of this, you know, I think it's still an open question as to what this would look like. So how can companies do better on this, I think, is really the question. And so some of it is in terms of how they implement these regulations, but I think some of it is ensuring that as they regulate speech, they're protecting, or they're making sure that they, what's the phrase that I'm looking for here, that they have cultural competence in doing so, cultural and linguistic competence. What this means in practice is when you're looking at all of these different places in the world, you are applying universal frameworks to how you look at and govern speech, but you're also making sure that people understand what things mean in a local environment. So, you know, the way that we use slang, for example, the way that we look at identity, of course, these should be guided by universal principles, but we should also make sure that that when platforms are entering these different jurisdictions, that they do have a sense of what they're looking at and what things mean in a given context.
Thank you. And because the theme of today, all of today, we're looking at digital technology and its impact. Let me ask, does it matter? Because you use one argument that says, well, the digital sphere is, it's not real, it's not physical, there's no impact on the real world. So yes, we should have rules that govern public spaces and freedom of expression in the real world, but in the online space, doesn't matter. Can you sort of help us to just lay out why what happens online matters?
Absolutely. So right now, I'm from the US. I think that's probably fairly apparent from my accent. And we're seeing bills that seek to limit what children can do online. Now, of course, we need to protect children. There's a lot of ways to do that. But one of the things that my organization that I work for, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, has looked at is the way that young people use the internet today to access different information about their identity. So one of these bills, the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA, would restrict the ability of youth to kind of explore their identities. It would. We're also looking at age verification mechanisms that would require people to show ID before they can access certain services. As we mentioned, gender identity here, or sexual identity, that's something where kids do explore the internet. And of course, we want to make sure that they can do so safely, but they do utilize the internet to explore and test out different identities, particularly in places where they don't feel safe to do so in the real world. So that's one example. I think another example that we're looking at right now is in areas of conflict. This is, in these different places around the world, whether we're talking about Sudan or Haiti or Palestine, these are places where it's very important for people to be able to access information that they can't necessarily get on the ground, to access vital resources, but also to share what's happening in those contexts, particularly when media are not able to be present.
Thanks. I'm interested in the importance of representation, because, and particularly for the adult learning community, in many circumstances, the learners are people who've fallen through the cracks. They need a second chance. Often maybe they had a poor experience in school, they had difficulties accessing the basic skills that they need, maybe they're transitioning, their jobs have disappeared, they need to find a new future. So for many of these communities, it's really important to see people like them represented, see role models, to have their language, their culture, their experiences validated. And yet, and we can put that pressure on governments to try and make our public spaces and our public events more like that. But in private spaces, how do you ensure that this really important role model representation and visibility also happens? Because this is what we know, that if you see people like you succeed and be given space and be validated and honored and heard and acknowledged, then that gives you power. And the whole theme of adult learning is empowerment. So how important is it that in these more private spaces, we also pay attention to representation and inclusion?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's absolutely vital. And this is one of the areas where I think it's so important that people understand how these platforms work. A lot of the work that I do is trying to educate people about these spaces and about how to improve them. And so this is where I think representation in the conversations about how private spaces are governed is very important. And that's something that I work really hard to bring different voices to the table. I mean, my work focuses internationally. And so what I'm trying to do specifically is bring people from different places around the world to have a seat at the table, to have a role in the discussions with platforms about how they're governed. But I think that this is particularly important when it comes to all types of marginalized identities, including people within our environments who might not otherwise be represented in those conversations.
Yeah, because one of the maybe the great myths that is sold about technology is that it's the great democracy, that it will allow the lesser known languages to be visible and to be shared and spoken, that it's the magic wand that would actually address some of the power imbalances we have in the real world. But that's not really happening, is it?
No, I mean, it's not really the great equalizer. And I think we do have to see both the good and the bad here. I personally, I don't come from, I wouldn't say a marginalized background, but I come from a pretty small town without much of an international and global outlook. And so in the global sphere, in the work that I do, that's not, it's not the best background to come from to do this kind of work. And so what the internet provided me with was the ability to reach people outside of that environment, to experience things that I didn't otherwise have access to learn about the world. And that eventually, brought me abroad, where I've been for, I think, 13 years of my life now. And so I think that, we do have to view the good here. We have to view the fact that the internet has enabled the preservation of languages, the preservation of educational materials. But it's also, of course, if it's not governed well, we risk these things disappearing too. And so, yeah, you've got to take the good with the bad, but I think that that's why I continue to do this work, why I continue to fight for a better, freer, more open, and in some ways safer internet.
Great, thank you. In a few minutes, I'm going to be opening the floor. So if you have a question, be ready. I'll come to you. And Sarah, I know you're watching what's happening online, the comments and questions that are coming in. So my final question to you, just in our first conversation, is we've got 150,000 users of the EPALE community, and that's people working in adult education. They're the trainers, they're the educators, the people developing curriculum and skills. What's their role? What can they do to ensure that the freedom of expression isn't just a concept, but it is truly inclusive and empowering?
Yeah, so the message to this community, which sounds like an absolutely wonderful community, and I'm so excited to have been introduced to it through this event. What can people do? There's a lot of ways that they can engage in these conversations. I'm happy to talk with folks after this. But if you want to understand more directly how to do that, I'm going to throw out a few links here. I think that they're in the document. So my organization, like I said, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, we do provide a lot of educational materials on digital safety, freedom of expression, digital security. So I encourage you to reach out to us and to look into that information. Another way that we've engaged people all over the world is through an effort called the Santa Clara Principles on Transparency and Accountability and Content Moderation. This is a framework that we've set forth with civil society from around the world to ensure that platforms are held accountable, are transparent, and offer recourse when people do have their speech or their expression restricted. But there's a lot of other ways that people can engage in these conversations. There's a lot of online fora, a lot of accessible events, digital accessible events that people can look to. And so I'll try to send some of those links out later as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to now include some content and questions from the audience, and I know Sarah will maybe bringing in something from online. And I know I've got a question coming in from Gita Ramjian Singh. You are an EPALE hero from the Netherlands, and I'll explain the hero status later, which means you're very active on our platform, contributing to our thinking. So you've got a question.
Thank you for that, Tamsin. Thank you for your keynote. I have a question with regards to, in this digital age, and I need to be correct in this, freedom of expression often comes with blurred boundaries and evolving digital mores. Digital mores around the responsibility, and especially when it comes to harmful or misleading content, it spreads quite quickly. How do you think that individuals, tech companies, and governments should be held accountable for the consequences of online speech? And where do we draw the line between protecting freedom of expression and ensuring that it doesn't cause harm in the real world?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And, I don't want to keep beating the same drum, but for me, this is why universal frameworks are so important. These are frameworks which, states and various actors have decided upon over the years to ensure that we do have universal values represented on, in our states, but also online. But I think that, in addition to that, I want to re-emphasize the importance of cultural competence, because this means that, we're not just applying the same values, throwing them at states and at corporations and then saying, okay, here's here's freedom of expression, let's just protect it in this way. It's also ensuring that we have proper training for companies as they go about implementing, whether we're talking about implementing regulations like the Digital Services Act, or implementing their own rules, and that this training includes linguistic and cultural sensitivity in understanding how things, what things mean in certain cultural contexts. So freedom of expression is very important to me, and so when I think about online harms, for me, censorship is also a major online harm. But at the same time, of course, I think that this is where education comes in as well, where it's really important, not just for our educational systems, but also adult education, parental education, to ensure that as people come online, whether we're talking about children or the next billion, that they do understand, how to exist in a global environment.
Thank you. Sarah, we've got a couple of inputs online, I think.
Yes, we do actually, and we actually have quite an active audience, thanks to everyone who is joining online. Actually, we have thumbs up, we have likes, we have people joining from all around Europe, from Greece and Spain and Turkey. So just to let you know a little bit of the energy that is also spreading online. And yeah, we do have a couple of questions actually. The first one I would like to bring to Gillian is coming from Ludmilla, and it's quite a personal one. So she asked, Gillian, is there something that you have been personally banned on popular online platform, and how to post something and where when we are banned?
Sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yeah. Is there something that you have been personally banned on personal online?
Have you been cancelled? Have you been banned from somewhere?
Yes.
And then if you've been banned, in other words, your freedom of expression has been curtailed, been limited, how and where do you post?
Yes, it actually has happened to me a couple of times. I'm going to give two interesting examples because I think that they do speak to why this is so important to me. The first one was I used to work on global internet research around how states were restricting the internet, so filtering, censorship, different technical mechanisms to do this. This was my previous job at the Harvard Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society. And during that time, we were doing testing and research by literal technical research on lists of websites. And so we put my personal blog on one of those lists, just out of curiosity, just to see. And through that, found out that the government of Yemen was restricting my website. Now that seems really odd. Why would Yemen care about what I have to say? I was just a little blogger with only a few hundred followers. But it turned out that one of my blog posts had been inundated with spam comments that included pornography websites. And because of the way that this particular government was restricting pornography, I got sort of caught in the net. So I was not posting pornography myself, but spam happens, particularly on the open web. And so as such, I found my own website got censored. It was a quick fix. I was able to delete the comments and get out of that. Another thing, though, that happened was sharing a breast cancer awareness campaign. There was one in Germany a few years ago, I think it was Pink Ribbon, where the images that were used were women exposing one breast. In some cases post-mastectomy. And I shared that campaign and got my Facebook page banned for 30 days. And that's another thing where actually that rule has changed now. So this is one of the examples I was talking about before. The rule is much more liberal when it comes to women's health. But that was another example where, yeah, I would say that certainly is a cancellation.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, we have another one coming from the EPALE platform, actually, and it comes from Floor. Just let me just show it. It comes back to the issue of agency that you were talking about before. So she was asking, I'd like to look more closely at the role and agency of the individual in the process that you describe. How can ordinary citizens effectively participate in shaping the digital landscape, and how can they reclaim their rights? I think you partly already responded, but maybe you can elaborate more. I mean, there's a question requesting you to delve deeper.
Sure, absolutely. And I think I also left out the rest of the answer to the last question, but I'll tie these together. I mean, where do you go, I think was the rest of that question. I think that there are, that space on these corporate platforms is closing in some ways, but I think it's also really important to remind people that the rest of the internet still exists. It's true that these centralized platforms like X or Facebook or Instagram are important because that's how you access an audience. But again, like the internet is huge, and so when we think about governance, I think we also have to think about the fact that as these centralized platforms, as that space closes, we can look to other places. And so, how do ordinary folks get engaged? Like I said, there are some of these processes, but we're also seeing an increased space throughout Europe for engagement with things like Digital Services Act implementation. So I encourage folks to look at our website, to look at the websites of organizations like Access Now, accessnow.org, which has a strong presence in Brussels, as well as the number of other organizations there that are trying to create space for people to engage with these regulatory processes.
Thank you. Let me just check if there's anyone here in the hall who would like to ask a question, because we've got more questions coming online, which is great. Our community is very active. Yes, we've got a hand up. If you could stand up, the microphone's just coming to you. Just introduce yourself, please, and then ask your question. It will come on.
Thank you. My name is Gerard Prime. I'm also from the Netherlands, like Gita. And I'm involved in decentralized identification. So ADAS regulations 2.0 is also coming up. And I was wondering, in what way are you familiar with these activities related to the European Union? Have you heard of this? Giving more privacy to the citizen? ADAS regulation, have you heard of it?
I'm not personally engaged in that. No, sorry, yeah.
So it's actually when a citizen or an adult learner is online, with this, it is possible to give more privacy to the person without giving every personal information. Actually, there is it's a technology that is going to be used to protect people from what you have just shared with us.
Wonderful.
So I was wondering, maybe from EPALE also, this is a European Union activity, maybe also something, this could enhance our activity as well, as it is a technology event. And we are focusing on adult learners, and this is something that is not only in the Netherlands active, but in also other countries working on technology that is going to enhance the privacy of people. So that's a question in general also to you as a moderator.
Yeah, you raise an interesting question in the sense that each of us often has multiple identities. So we have our legal identity, which is either our national insurance number, it's linked to our passport number, it's how we identify ourselves when we engage with our banks and with government services. But we also have multiple personal identities with our passions and our interests. And maybe there are things that you choose to keep quiet, private, and others that you're more open with. So you've raised that really interesting question about, should they all be connected? Should you be able to fragment them? Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. So just to give an example, if you refer this to a passport, we all have our passport as we're traveling, but if you have a digital passport, that can also involve digital skills or skills passports. But if you have a driver's license, you can add it to your passport. You reveal your attributes, as these are parts of your identity, with others like employers to share skills on a granular way, how long and when and with whom you want to share it. And this is an opportunity also for adult learners or people involved in adult learning activities to allow them to introduce these new regulations, but also the technology that is going to be developed, and prototype with it and learn with it. So this is something I would like to introduce, as maybe you're not familiar with that as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And in fact, I think that it was either the Commissioner or Anne Branch talked about the individual learning account, that this is being promoted so that learning is not just what you do at university or not, but you can have micro skills, micro credentials, and add it up. So your visibility to future employers and colleagues is lots of different pieces that are part of your learning identity.
Exactly. This is about lifelong learning, and when it stops, or pre or post learning activities are also possible to store it. And based on technology, you can also add recognition of prior learning activities on this as well, and to have it as an alternative line to share it with employers or to whom you want to learn to share it. Yes.
Thank you. So Gillian, maybe you just want to say a few words about the importance or not of the ability to have multiple identities online. There's your legal identity, maybe your learning and your employment identity. Then there's your secret passion identity. You know, I'm going to out myself now as a huge science fiction fan. And I know that science fiction is one of those things you either love it or hate it. I love it. That's one of my identities. It's not linked to my professional identity until today, which probably permanently from now on it will be. But so I think this is really key to freedom of expression, isn't it? That we can be different things in different places.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, this is what concerns me about the potential loss of the right to be anonymous online. Obviously, anonymity comes with risks as well, but people's ability to, play around in different fora, whether we're talking about personal interests or things like health information. I mean, I'll out myself. This is, I think it's, on the online anyway. I'm a cancer survivor. And when I was seeking information and trying to participate in health-related groups, I didn't want to do so under my real name on Facebook for various reasons, including not wanting to, out myself to people in my professional community just yet. And so at that time, I, broke the rules and created a separate Facebook account. And that's against Facebook's rules. You're supposed to only have a single identity. Mark Zuckerberg has said many times that he believes that people of integrity only use one identity. And that's something with which I strongly disagree, whether we're talking about personal interests or protecting, private information about ourselves.
Thank you. Sarah, I think we've got a couple more interventions online.
Yes, we do. Okay, so let me just have a look. So we do have one from our colleagues from EPALE Ireland. So let me show it. It comes back to something that you were talking about before. So it's how important is the need for an appeal process in regards to clarification of intent and meaning when someone has had comments removed or a user has been banned for violation. So comes back to the banning issue we were talking about before.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm always happy to talk about appeals. This is something that I started arguing for probably over a decade ago, before most platforms had them. Not to brag or call myself kind of a digital hipster, but Facebook, when it first launched, actually said this decision is final and cannot be appealed anytime someone's content was taken down. Over the years, through the advocacy of many different people, that changed, and Facebook was actually one of the first platforms to offer that, and then other platforms followed. Now it is part of the Digital Services Act. It's also something that we put forward in the Santa Clara Principles, which I mentioned earlier. And appeals are important because they give people, first of all, because companies make mistakes. I think that's the first thing we have to acknowledge. Content moderation is hard. It's not an easy thing to do, particularly with millions, or in some cases, billions of users on platforms. And so we have to accept that mistakes are going to happen. And that's why universal appeals are so important. But as it stands right now, platforms do reserve the right to not offer appeals in certain circumstances. Some of those I think, I agree with, things like child sexual abuse imagery, where the potential for harm of allowing the content is worse than the potential for harm of restricting it. But when we're talking about things like violent extremism, that's an area where big mistakes do happen and can be really problematic or really harmful to people. For example, people who are sharing journalistic content or information about what's happening in a certain conflict area, whether we're talking about media or citizens. So that's an area that I would, that I've talked about a lot in my work, and where, companies are still not adhering to the principles that they should be. So very much in favor of appeals in all circumstances.
Thank you. So maybe I'll conclude maybe because we are heading towards the end of the keynote, but with a question that comes back also to the topic of this very day of the conference. So also on adult education specifically, and we have this. Oh, sorry, it was this one from Marinos. How can adults be reskilled to express their freedom of expression, or to select the appropriate platforms to do so? And how does this affect their skills in the workplace?
That's a great question. It's a hard one to answer as well. I mean, I think that, it is personal. Where you want to express yourself online is very much a personal decision. I don't use Facebook anymore for many of the reasons that I've talked about. But for me, places like LinkedIn are still really important, even though I, don't necessarily like the direction the platform's headed. How else would I connect with people in a professional environment? And so I think it's very much a personal decision, but how can people reskill in terms of, how these platforms operate? I think that that's something where, there is a lot of educational material out there. Like I said, I'd be more than happy to point people to it. For example, analysis of how different platforms are implementing regulatory frameworks and how well they're doing on that. One site that I'll reference here is called Ranking Digital Rights. It's an excellent organization that actually has looked very carefully at how these platforms adhere to these various regulations and principles, and kind of ranks them on how they're doing in that regard. So that would be one thing that I would absolutely point to for people to look at.
Thank you. We've got a hand up. We'll come to you. If you just stand up so we can see to bring the microphone. If you could introduce yourself and ask your question briefly. Yeah, go ahead. Just speak. It should work.
I'm not so sure it's a question. And
comment,
by the way,
please go ahead.
Thank you so much for everything you told us today. I was just thinking about a new puzzle for you. So when you're leaving here, we have a puzzle, because this is the discussion we have. I'm from Denmark, and we have a lot of focus on personal rights and what you can express, and I know you have all over Europe. So we have this community, the EPALE community. It's a good example when you talk about what you're allowed to do or not. This is only professionals, not students, and it's supposed to be for people teaching or working with knowledge or research, and so it's professional. And it's all over, as you heard, and we are 150 members. Still, we have moderators saying, even though you are professionals, we still have to read your blog post or whatever. It has to go through the local NNS to be posted, which we discuss a lot, because is that a good idea? Should you be free enough or trust your professional co-workers enough and say, you can, on this online forum, the EPALE, of course you can just post whatever you think about, because we believe you're professionals and you have learned enough in life to know your own balance on the platform. At the same time, things can happen, because you have a lot of people, and even though you are professional, sometimes you do stupid things. So this discussion, and we have this joke every time, if I do a blog post, I'll always write to the people in NNS, I'll say, if you will let it through, we'll see. As a joke, because I'm used to that people trust me. So sometimes a moderating can feel distrusting, which is very bad for democracy. So this is a puzzle for your next book. What to do about this, because we need to discuss it, and because we're also discussing now the digital transition in Europe, we need to look at ourselves as well. So I don't know if it's a question, but I'm really happy for everything you told us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll think of a quick comment.
Yeah,
it's appropriate. Yeah, I'll just give a quick comment. Without knowing much about it, I don't want to prescribe what's best for this given community, but what I will say is that to me emphasizes the importance of clear rules. So whenever there is moderation, and I'll say, at my job, we also have things that go through a process before they're published for various reasons, editorial control, let's say. But I think that this is where very clear rules are important for a community like that, so that people know what they're up against in that editorial process.
Thank you. And I bet this is a conversation that will keep going. And it's obviously part of an ongoing discussion about what a community is, how it's built, and how it develops. Just to give you a sense that yesterday, I'm part of a very small group called Moderators Europe. So we're a group of professional moderators, and we're all former journalists. So again, we operate in theory at the top of our professions. And one of them sent a message on our group chat yesterday saying, has any of you got professional indemnity insurance? Because as a journalist, I can't find one that costs me less than 1,600 euros a year, because insurers consider that what I do for a living is so risky, they can't insure me. And I have insurance, but I'm insured as a consultant, and I get it for 125 euros a year. And that's considered what I do is potentially much less risky, and therefore to insure me against making a mistake that might cost a real problem is a challenge. So there's a whole big package that we might open up for another theme or another workshop. It's a great topic. Thank you for raising it. Can we say a warm thank you to Gillian for sharing her insights?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So what a great start to the day. Our brains are ticking away and our online audience is commenting and reflecting and thinking, and that's great. And as I promised, as I said, we've got 14 different national side events being organized across Europe, linked into these 3 days of conferences. And today we've got an event being organized in Greece, and we are going to, if our technology works, have a live link up to colleagues in Greece. So welcome to the NSS Greece team in the Mytilene city in Lesbos, Northern Aegean region. So Angeliki Petridou, welcome. Hello. What's happening where you are?
Hello. Hello. We are here with our Deputy Director of Erasmus Plus and the EPALE NSS Greece. We want to wish you every success on the conference. Thank you very much for the continuous support of the CSS. So now we basically have finished with the informative part of the EPALE platform, and we are going to continue with 2 workshops on Erasmus KA1 and KA2 and how to implement, how to use in the best way the EPALE platform during all the stages, like in preparation, the application, the implementation of our projects, of course, the dissemination. I will just show you now the people here. Wait, I will turn the camera.
Turn the camera, yes.
To say hello. Μπορείτε να χαιρετήσετε.
Hello! They're clapping.
So, yes. It's a little difficult.
Okay. I would like to thank you again for the support for the whole time. I would also like to say that it's an honor for us to have us here, just a little part of your conference at least. And we will continue our work here from Lesbos, from every island, from every part of Greece. We're just trying to succeed, and we also have the same objective to implement as to the best of our needs and to achieve our target in making EPALE known in every part of Greece.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelika. See you again soon. Bye. So they're just a little insight into what the community in Greece are going to be discussing and exploring later today. Now, it just came up, and then this is now the opportunity in my script to talk about a new initiative we've got on the EPALE community called the Hero System and the badges, because yes, I accept that it's a system that requires moderation, but some of you have been particularly active. And the heart of EPALE is the community itself. And with more than 150,000 and growing registered members, that's a strong and healthy heartbeat. And we want to appreciate that community and celebrate those contributions that keep the EPALE heartbeat beating away. So we've put in place a badge system to spotlight the most active and dedicated members. Now, you can earn points by writing posts, subject to moderation, thank you for highlighting that, but making comments and engaging through the contents through likes and sharing. And if you collect enough points through your interaction online, then you join the EPALE Hall of Fame, and you can even be showcased amongst the community heroes. And so we've got these badge systems so when you see that on the EPALE community, you know that these are people who regularly contribute, they're community leaders, if you like, amongst the community. And we've invited some of them to join us here in Bologna. So give us a wave if you're here as a community leader. Let's see you. Excellent. Hello. And not only are they participating this morning, we've actually got a special activity happening for them later this afternoon. So you too, those of you online, you could become a community hero and perhaps feature in next year's event. So now we're going to move into the next part of our agenda, and we've got a panel looking at tech-enabled transformation in adult learning and education. And I've got 4 members of my panel. I'm going to invite 2 of them to join me here on stage and 2 are joining online. So joining online, I have Michael Horgan, who is a team leader for skills for the twin transition from DG Employment. Hello, Michael. Lovely to see you.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you. Joining me here online, I have Safa Gnam, who is the Associate Program Director for Tactical Tech. Hi, Safa, please come and join me. I also have here in the room Gemma Parado-Leon, the Digital Educator, Content Creator and Project Manager for OPEX. Please join me. And our other online panel member is Joe Litabarski, who is a PhD researcher from Maastricht University. Welcome, Joe.
Hello, everyone.
So, given that our title is around tech-enabled transformation in adult education and learning, I'm going to start by asking Michael, because we heard from both the Commissioner and Anne Branch the focus that's being put on skills, and particularly digital skills. So can you help us unpick what do we mean by digital skills and competencies, and how is the European Commission defining them?
Thank you very much, and very nice to be here. Sorry, I'm not in Bologna physically, but so to answer your question, Tamsin, so digital competence for us are the confident, critical, and responsible use of and engagement with digital technologies for learning, work, and participation in society. So it's defined as a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And we have developed in the Commission the Digital Competence Framework for Citizens, which provides a framework for a common understanding of digital skills and frames digital skills policy, and is used for things like curriculum development, assessment, and so on. It has 5 areas and 21 competencies. And so as well as it's things like information and data literacy and collaboration and content creation, I would say transversal skills are very firmly embedded. So things like problem solving and creativity and so on are very firmly embedded in the DigComp. So it has been very successful tool and has been used for many tools for assessment, for competence, policy framing, and so on, throughout at EU level. And quite recently, we have tried to take account in the DigComp of emerging technologies such as AI, datafication, phenomena such as teleworking, disinformation, extremely important now, and the new skills requirements that these new technologies such as AI are bringing. We have created a lot of new examples of knowledge, skills, and attitudes to enable citizens to be able to face these and live and work alongside these new technologies. So, for example, it could be citizens should know how to formulate searches, to prompt, and be aware of AI and in its possibilities as they work with it. I can continue, but I'm happy to leave there for.
That's great. Let me just sort of ask a question. Does it make sense to teach people digital skills when what we see is the trend for technology is to make it easier and more adapted for everyday use? It used to be that if you wanted to interrogate a computer, you had to write code. And now our chatbots are so simple. My kids, under 10 ask Siri questions, and with chatbot, you can use everyday language. So do we need to keep focusing on training people with digital skills? And Michael, I'd like you to perhaps just reflect on that.
Yes, absolutely. I think it does, because I think we're talking, very importantly, as I mentioned, we're talking about the critical use of AI to solve problems. And I think, if anything, the emergence of these new technologies like AI actually increase the need for people to learn digital skills and be proficient. So in the face of the AI and other emerging technologies, people need actually to have the skills to work alongside them, the competences to work alongside them. And it's the best way for them to be empowered and achieve agency, to be able to work with these new tools. So while most workers will not really, will not be required necessarily to have the specialist skills like machine learning, natural language processing, and so on, everybody will be increasingly working alongside AI. And this will require basic AI competences, knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And maybe I'll just mention, we've had a Cedefop, our agency in Thessaloniki, have done an AI skills survey recently, and they found that 61% of European workers, at least, will already need very soon new knowledge and skills to cope with the impact of AI in the next 5 years. So these include things like being able to recognize misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes, which, as we see, are even threatening our democracies. But on the other hand, not many people are actually participating yet in training in the knowledge and skills they need to use these AI tools. So I think it's a question of we have a really increased big upskilling challenge. And one thing that I think that Cedefop's survey sort of found initial evidence of is that there may be an AI divide in Europe already emerging, because while in some northern countries, over a third of workers, maybe half, are already working with AI technology in the workplace, we find that the numbers are already less in some southern and eastern countries, like Poland, Greece, and Spain. So this is also an additional concern.
Thank you, Michael. Safa, let me come to you, because Michael's just referenced, that digital skills and the ability to think about that critically is key to a functioning democratic system. But your organization, goes beyond just looking at disinformation to really thinking critically about the role of digital and media in our broader society, and you link it to an understanding and analysis of power systems. We touched on that with Gillian a little bit earlier, but can you tell us, what's the foundational approach of your organization?
Yes, absolutely. So, we tackle digital and media literacy in various ways. And in some of our projects, we are really trying to reach people where they are. And so, picture this: you are walking down a busy shopping street in a large city, and you see something that looks like a tech store. Everything's bright white, there's glass, it's called the Glass Room, and you hop in and you soon realize that it's a free exhibition, nothing is for sale, and there is information and thought-provoking pieces and discussion-provoking pieces about privacy, about technology, about power systems or power structures, systems of oppression, business models that are fueling these technologies, that are behind these technologies. And so basically we are trying to meet people where they're at to have these important critical conversations in different formats. So this is one particular project, but we have many, many others. And the idea is to invite people to explore, discuss, to interrogate technology without having to be an engineer. Anyone can have these conversations if it's framed in an appropriate way for those audiences.
Okay, thank you. So you've given us the example, of the Glassroom exhibition and ensuring that people can, ask questions. But let's maybe, before we move on, let's touch a little bit on the whole ethics of technology, because it's very much, owned by private companies. They set the rules, they choose the direction of technology, and they'll say, well, we give consumers what they want, because if not, they wouldn't pay the money for it. But there's a lot more behind it, not least, the ethics and power structures of how they're produced, where they come from. So can you also touch on that, the question of oppression in our technology, and also, bias and control?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much to say about this. So I could talk about it for a whole month and learn about it too. There's so much to learn, but the idea is, so let's say we want to talk about something like AI. We would like to train adult audiences about AI. What does that mean? AI is so many different things. So let's say, one aspect of AI we want to talk about are algorithms. In order to understand algorithms, we need to discuss that data, a great deal of our information and all of the people around us and people in places we don't even know, that data is used to feed into the system to train it. But what data is it? What data is selected and what data is left out, is ignored? And how are those algorithms used? Maybe I'm using this algorithm on a social media app, but are these algorithms, or at least the sort of code or systems, are they being sold for other purposes? For example, in law enforcement, or in conflict regions, or there are so many examples of how these algorithms could be used. So the same thing where maybe I think my data is going, actually it's going everywhere else. And so in order to understand these systems, it's important to also tackle the parts of the technology that there are not easy answers, or there are not findable answers for. And I think in a lot of these cases, we are having these open-ended discussions about ethics, or about, who is really benefiting from these systems, who's making money from these systems, and who is maybe at risk, who is at the most risk for harm. And a lot of these discussions don't really have easy answers, or sometimes no clear answers at all, but we still have to have these conversations.
Thank you. Joe, I'm going to bring you in now, because your special area of focus is the history of adult learning and participatory democracy. And we know that there's a sort of a strong connection between the two. Now, we're focusing at the moment in our conversation about the role of technology, and we kind of tend to think that gadgets and technology are a new challenge. I'm certainly old enough to remember in my professional and personal life, there was a time before mobile phones and before the internet. But, are we obsessing about the wrong things? Haven't technology always played a role in society?
Yes, I also remember a time before the internet and before mobile phones. So yes, so no, I mean, so I think it's complex. I've been involved in this. I've got a personal history in this as a practitioner going back almost 2 decades. So I've been involved in what's sometimes called e-participation, e-democracy, and civic education in the EU since around 2008. So I think it's almost 17 years. And I have seen, as you say, several technologies framed as revolutionary, new, needing upskilling, completely new approaches, from social media to internet, teleconferencing, and most recently with artificial intelligence. And that's not to say that that framing is wrong. But it's just to say that I do think we should be reflexive when we frame technology as revolutionary, because there's a risk of a sort of technological determinism where it says, the technology suggests this solution. And I think the kind of looking at the history of how we responded to the internet, how we responded to mobile phones, mobile telecommunications, can give us a lot of options, lots of different approaches, and it suggests that there is kind of more agency. We have more agency in this current moment as we're kind of thinking about artificial intelligence. So not saying it's wrong to frame it as revolutionary, just to say that we do need to think about what that means. So I'm currently retraining myself in adult learning. I'm retraining in higher education as an academic historian at Maastricht University, and I'm looking at the history of this. So my kind of research is focusing on going back at least to the 1960s. But I think that the history of this does, in fact, go much longer back to radio democracy in the 1930s, and even maybe in the 1890s to kind of ideas of newspaper democracy. So lots of new kind of technologies have come along, and there have been discussions around how do you institutionalize these, how do you prepare people for these new technologies and the impact they're going to have on society. And I was at a think tank called Friends of Europe. Tamsin, I know you. We worked together there as well from 2011 to 2022. And I worked on a project called Debating Europe, which was had a kind of dual role as both a kind of trying to promote participation, e-participation, but also as a kind of civic education platform to get people involved in thinking about democracy, about how kind of we use new technologies for democracy, what kind of options are there. And one of the things which has come out of my research and which, as a practitioner kind of really was kind of driven home to me is that I think we sometimes miss the radical history of adult learning. The history of kind of empowerment in adult learning, where in fact there are lots of different ways to use these technologies and lots of different kind of approaches and kind of ways that they can be embedded in society. And I think maybe a greater understanding of how this is, I suppose, my message for the panel and for the audience is that a greater understanding of how we have incorporated previous kind of technologies can open up some of these possibilities, particularly maybe these kind of more radical possibilities of empowerment, of enfranchisement, some of the ways that technologies can empower users and have been used maybe even in ways that the designers of technologies did not anticipate. I think this is a really interesting point as well. But I'll kind of leave it there. I hope we get to kind of touch on some of that in more detail.
Thanks, Joe, and we will come back to that because I love the fact that you reminded us to these sort of radical empowerment roots of adult learning. Let me now to bring in Hima, because we've heard from Joe, a little bit about the historical perspective, and I'd like to bring in perhaps the geographical and space perspective. Alpex is based in Extremadura in Spain, and that's a region that is heavily remote, rural, with a lot of small communities. How does that, physical environment and its appropriate spaces impact on the work that you do?
Okay. Extremadura is, we are located in the southwest of Spain. So we have a large region with low population. So for us, depopulation is a problem because we have these isolated and small towns and villages, and the rural environment is full of old people that have low digital skills or no digital skills at all. And young people also leave to big towns to find better opportunities, to find a job or find education. So this is a problem with the population, as I said. And digital skills are very important to us because our lack of connection to the other regions of Spain. And from Aupex, that is a non-profit organization, we have two main programs related to enhance digital skills. The first program that we have is called Espacios Digitales, Digital Spaces, and is focus on improving employability, and the other one is newest, is related to reduce digital gender divide. So I have some notes here about the data that I want to share with you, because with Espacios Digitales, we have this longest program. We have been working digital skills for 25 years in Extremadura, with around 75 digital competence centers located in rural towns and rural villages. And we work with unemployed people, with young people, with people at risk of exclusion. And we reach around 25,000 people every year. So it's a big number for the low population that we have. And we share with people a variety of digital skills, training actions, and workshops and awareness-raising activities related to improve the employment, but also cutting-edge technologies such as 3D printing or coding, topics that are very important right now. And with the Conectadas, that is the Digital Gender Divide program, we started 2 years ago. It's a program from 2022 to 2024. We have reached now 12,500 women. And with our 40 hours digital skill-based program, and those women are middle-aged, and they have basic education, and the 84% of them are unemployed women. And also it's very important for us, the data, that also the 84% of our training actions with these women is in village with less than 3,000 inhabitants. So we are very focused and in enhancing digital skills. And as Michael said before, it's not just the knowledge or the skills, it's also the attitude with people. We need to seduce them to come to our training actions and to participate in the workshops. And as I said before, it's not just the basic use of digital skills, it's also to, I don't know how to say it, is to reinforce the idea to learn about some new topics. As I said, 3D printing, coding, digital, virtual and augmented reality. It's just to understand how cutting-edge technologies have a lot of possibilities, even when you have low basic digital skills.
Excellent, thank you. I think that's a really lovely example of how, you know, digital and technology advancements can be used to include rather than exclude. So you may live in a remote area in a small village, you might be an older woman with limited education, but there's still a chance for you to stay connected to the technology developments that are there. But you've got to be curious, you've got to think and believe in yourself that you are worth it and that you can learn these new things. So I think it's a really lovely example of how, you know, digital skills can be used to open up new environments for people. Michael, I'm going to come back to you because I think we've got a question from one of our EPALE community. Let me see, Dora. Dora's here. Yes, if you could stand up, we can give you the microphone because you've got a question that we'd like to ask linked to some of these topics.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I think my question is more related to our last speaker, Gemma,
Yes.
because somehow we have a similar situation in Portugal, is similar to yours. But my question is, we know that individuals acquire digital skills at their own pace. Some of them slower, some of them are faster, and you want them all to acquire digital skills. So how can we avoid creating a world where we have different situations between generations and also between regions and also between countries? because somehow you talked about the digital space, but the problems is most of times how to motivate these people to go there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You used a lovely word, by the way. You said we need to seduce people to coming into these spaces to learn it. So tell us how you do that. And then, Michael, I'm going to invite you to reflect on at an EU level how you see trying to make sure that equality is reached and that the digital skills reach all corners of Europe.
Well, of course, it's a challenge for the people and the people that are afraid of learn digital to come to our workshop and our training actions. But we, as e-facilitators and e-educators, we have to seduce, and for this reason, we want to, for example, we want to be up to date in very important topics of today. We have, for example, since 3 years, for 3 years ago, we have been working in different awareness raising web pages related to the risk and the benefits of AI. Also, it's called Somos CIA. We are the Society of Artificial Intelligence. It's like a basic focus on how AI impact in our lives. We also have this website related to disinformation and false information that we have called Infobirina. It's like a info pill for people just to understand the impact of disinformation in their daily lives. And also we are working since last year about digital well-being. That is also a very important topic for us, and people have to be aware of the problem of being constant online and with the digital divides. So we use this kind of websites just to have this these small groups to make community. We try to make groups as different as possible. We need to be people older and youngest just to share their points of view related to these topics. For example, we also of course make traditional digital skills workshops for finding a job or communicate online, but we think that make that small community reduce isolation, and also it's very important about the motivation of people. People feel more motivation if they are sharing their opinions and in these small spaces. So we are improving the way they focus on technology, and we're trying to change that mindset, because we think that if we learn better, if we learn together. So for us, it's very, very important, this kind of training.
Thank you. Michael, if I could invite you just to comment briefly on the policy objectives of digital skills and making sure it isn't yet another wedge intergenerationally or between richer advanced regions and poorer regions. What's the policy goal here?
Yes, and thanks, Dora, for the question. Very, very important question. And from a European perspective, of course, we are doing, we really want to avoid further digital divide and an unequal digital world. So the first thing we really we're trying to do at a European level is to ensure that every citizen, or as many as possible, have at least basic digital skills, because increasingly without that it's not possible to survive in the labor market or even in the society or even use public services. And we know that 9 out of 10 jobs require some level of digital skills. So we have set at a European level an 80% target, that 80% of the population will have digital skills by 2030. And we still have a lot of work to do, because at European level, there is huge variation between member states. We see that, while the Netherlands and Finland have already reached this 80% 2030 target, we have countries where, the level of digital skills, at least basic digital skills among adults is less than 30%. So we have really made a huge effort in this commission with unprecedented amount of funding. For example, 23 billion euros going on to digital skills and education in the Recovery and Resilience Fund, and then the European Social Fund, of course, also playing a very important role. So I think it really has been at the center of the work of this commission, the skills agenda and its various actions, including, for example, the Pact for Skills. And we have also introduced European approach to micro-credentials, which can also be a very helpful instrument for people to gain digital skills through bite-sized courses. We've also introduced a recommendation on individual learning accounts. So we've really been concentrating a lot on this basic priority of making sure that the whole population has necessary digital skills. Maybe one final thing I would add is that we, of course, are very concerned with what we call enabling factors, especially in the area of digital education and skills. And in November 2023, the Commission proposed a council recommendation on enabling factors such as accessibility, equipment, connectivity, to ensure that these aspects are equally available and equally accessible in both rural and urban areas, and irrespective of socioeconomic status. So access is very important, as Gemma rightly said, and she gave the Extremadura case. This is something that we need to ensure that people have access to the digital skills and also to the possibility of upskilling and digital education.
Thank you, Michael. I think we're going to, for a little bit, focusing on the elephant in the room, I feel, which is AI, the extent to which it is, completely seamlessly and invisibly integrated in our modern environment. We probably have no idea of the extent to which actually, AI is touching our lives. But Safa, what do we need to know about AI? Do we need to understand how it works? Do we need to understand about the cloud, the data usage, exploitative methods? Does that matter? And, are humans in control? Human oversight? Is it possible for us to have unbiased AI? Does it matter? So, give us 3 minutes on AI, please.
These are great questions. I mean, there is a lot of buzz on AI these days. Like, it's definitely a big keyword that we hear over and over again, and with good reason. I mean, artificial intelligence systems are really, they work much faster, much, sometimes they happen behind the scenes at a rate that is like beyond what any human being could do and beyond what former methods of technology could do. But when we're talking about AI, all of these questions come up. And, I think sometimes when we tackle how to teach adults about how AI works, we might jump in really far ahead, like, okay, this is how the system works. But actually, we could start even 10 steps earlier to acknowledge that AI, our systems, are software programs built by people. And the people who build these systems, just like everyone else, has implicit biases and any other type of bias, or maybe inherent discrimination that maybe they don't realize. Even the well-meaning people may not realize it, but these biases are hard-coded into these systems. And so even if a system is being used for something that's, seems like, oh, it's fine because there's human oversight, blah, blah, blah. But what about how the tool is actually built? There, for example, I mentioned earlier about data sets that inform these systems. Which data sets are selected, are prioritized, and are left out completely? This is just one small aspect of it. There are amazing projects that cover these topics. For example, coded bias was a really interesting research project that kind of grew to show how facial recognition technology was unable to accurately detect the faces of especially Black women. Very, very often they were unable to detect those faces accurately. And so it, you know, it raises a lot of questions on all these different aspects, not only data sets, how they're applied, is there human oversight? And yeah, I think it really, you know, it may not seem at first glance apparent as to why it should matter to everyone, but I think that's part of what the educational element is to look at where are these technologies used, where might people come across them in their daily life, knowing or unknowingly, because, you know, sometimes these systems are being used in places that we may not realize. So I think it's not so much that, you know, people don't care. I think it's more that people don't know. They don't know and they don't realize. And so I think that can be part of the exploration. And also to say for any educators in the audience, I think there may be a hesitancy to discuss technology in these kinds of ways because you may not think you have all the answers, but actually it's okay not to know all the answers. Even the experts say they don't know what's going on, but we still need to talk about it, even if it's not tied up neatly in a bow, you know, even if it's messy.
Thank you. And before we move on, let's just again have a thought about AI, which is, you know, AI is a process that learns from large amount of data. And it's insatiable. It's like a black hole. The more data you put in, the more it processes. But in the past, I know I'm going to come to Joe about this as well, about the historical roots of education and learning. What we've tended to do are systems of publishing or sort of scientific robustness have always been about you have multiple drafts, and then what comes out that's finally published, that is then shared, is the best. It's the sort of final version. It is the optimum information. And with technology being so ubiquitous, we just put random stuff. You know, I had a coffee in a cafe this morning. It was a good, bad coffee. I might just not think too much about it. Say, it wasn't a good coffee. Didn't like the cup. That's all going into the machine. So instead of having the highest level of quality and robustness and thought going into what we publish, and that being the basis for knowledge generation, because AI is so hungry and we're all producing random stuff all the time, it is, you know, with the garbage in, garbage out theory, can we trust what's coming out? Don't we already have examples of AI hallucinating? And with generative AI writing stuff, and the next step, AI using that as an input and taking that as equivalent truth. Are there risks here, particularly when so much of what we're looking for in adult education is critical skills? And how do you tell fact from non-fact, opinion and bias? And yet we've got this machine that's just churning up any random thought that anyone's put out there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, part of understanding technology is getting a sense of what it's good at and what it's not good at, what it can help us with and what it can distract us with. So, you know, with certain tools like ChatGPT, which is a very popular text generation software that's, you know, generated by AI, what data is fed into ChatGPT? I mean, there are millions of web pages. There's fan fiction, there's Reddit threads. So conversations from the darkest corners of the internet. There's misinformation, there's hate speech, you know, put into these AI systems, into these chatbots, into things like ChatGPT. And so what happens, yes, exactly, is that so it's fed all kinds of information, including, you know, high quality information, but including like total nonsense. And then what it comes out with, there are many websites online where it is just posting text from ChatGPT. So what's happening is that AI texts are feeding AI. Exactly. It's this system. So now, you know, researchers have been saying, actually for at least 1 year, maybe more, is that AI is already starting to quote unquote hallucinate. Like it's the results that come out of these texts are just like, this is complete complete garbage. And which, you know, if you're only using it for entertainment purposes might be just fine, but, you know, you have people who are using it to write their reports, write their emails. You have political campaigns using it to write their strategy and their emails to voters. Not only emails, but their phone calls to voters. It's really, it's being used in very serious ways, actually, that can affect our democracies and that have been affecting our democracies around the world.
Thank you. I'm going to be opening the floor in quite a short time, and I see you already have a hand up, and I'm sure our online audiences have that. But I already have a question that's come in from Luis from Spain. Can I see Luis? Yes. And it's a question I think we're going to send to Joe, because I think he's got a really good historical perspective. So please ask your question. Go ahead.
Hola. Sí.
Yes.
Hello. I'm come from Zaragoza, Spain, or Extremadura. This question is for the panel in general. I have a note because this is a very difficult question. My students use ChatGPT in their homeworks every day, but they don't usually know how to read and understand a complex text or a problem. Absolutely, technology is a valuable tool that helps us teach. However, human learning relies on other behaviors such as comprehensive reading, on a subject to get context, conceptual frameworks, analytical thinking, personal synthesis and organization of information, etc. Are we at the risk of forgetting this non-tech aspect or skills, if you prefer, that are so critical for actual learning? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luis. That's a really great question. And coming from your actual environment where your students are providing input from ChatGPT, but it's perhaps what we might consider as the old-fashioned skills of reading yourself, getting some context, organizing your information, seeing patterns, analysis. You know, are we forgetting these non-technology skills that are so critical for actually learning how to do something? So maybe, Joe, you can give us a historical context of how, you know, technology has shaped our learning environment and the pathway of skills that goes with that.
Yes, and well, the first thing I would say is that there is also a long history of this fear of technology eroding people's cognitive faculties, and you know, you might remember this with television. Television, when it came in, was seen as something that turns people into passive participants, couch potatoes who don't think for themselves. So there is this kind of this anxiety around technology automating people's cognition, and this is a long-standing fear. Again, not to say that it's wrong, but just to kind of frame it historically. And I think the same with artificial intelligence. So if we think about the long history of AI research begins in the 1940s, and the first hardware implementation of an artificial neural network, which is the basis of today's deep learning algorithms, was the Mark I perceptron in 1957. So it's easy to say, oh, these machines were so crude. They're nothing like the sophisticated machines we have today. They can't teach us any real lessons, but they were not seen as crude at the time. They were seen as cutting edge. And today, I think we should be a bit reflexive. The AI that we see today, that we use today and we think of as completely cutting edge, will be seen as crude in the future. So we should just take a little step back, I think, and realize that there is a history of the way that we react to technology. And the 1940s and 50s is this period when computers enter the popular imagination. There are these huge mainframe computers like the Harvard Mark I and ENIAC, and they're described as electronic brains, which can calculate faster than Einstein. They're seen as these sort of superhuman intelligences. And just a very quick example, because I mentioned that we can recover agencies from the past, and one quick example from the 1960s that might speak to the question, I hope it does. One of the earliest computer-assisted education systems from around 5960 was Plato, called the Programmed Logic for Automatic Teaching Operations at the University of Illinois. And system managers had a very different idea about how this system would work to users. System managers saw Plato as a teaching machine, where you plug in students and education comes out. But users did not see Plato that way. Many users on the Plato mainframe system used the system to develop video games, some of the earliest video games produced, and they had to hide these video games from the system managers. They gave them names like Pedit5 and M199H and so on, otherwise they would be deleted because it wasn't education, it wasn't learning. But in developing these video games, users were also developing their skills in programming, in social use of technologies and so on. So there can be, I think, one of the panelists said, how do we seduce users or learners into kind of using the systems, the technologies in a way that is going to kind of educate and support their development. And I think a really important lesson from the past is it has to be done in kind of co-creation with learners, with kind of system users as well. And I think this is one really important lesson that we can maybe think about as we're thinking about this problem of ChatGPT. So how are users today using ChatGPT? How do they want to use it? And is that the way that we want them to use it? And I think that's an interesting discussion that we should have with the learners, with the students. So yeah.
Thank you. Jaime, maybe you might want to just also reflect on that, because I know one of the interesting parts of the conversation we've had in preparation for today, you talked about how the digital skills that people come in for are only part of the picture. It's also about tackling social isolation and loneliness, and for people who feel pushed out and not connected to the world that's happening out there, it's like a way to help people reconnect back in, to feel inspired to make a change in their lives. So Lewis has said, look, are we losing the human aspects and the human skills that are so important? Maybe you just want to make a comment on how, yes, digital skills is officially what's happening, but there's so much else happening around that.
Well, in our digital competence centers, we try not to lose this human part of communicating in front, face to face. And we also know that technology and the digital impact in people's life is very important. But we think we have to improve the relationship between the learners, because as I said before, if we learn together, if we are in a physical space that we have share our thoughts related, for example, to AI or disinformation or digital well-being or looking for a job or whatever, you have more open mind to share what you think, and this is, I think that is the difference that digital skill centers have in the community. So we need to go on with this kind of project in Extremadura, in Spain, and in all over Europe, just to have the people. I don't know. It's more like an idea of making community, and this is a community conference, and for us, have the human impact is very important.
Thank you. Sarah, let's pull it. I know we've got some comments and questions happening online, and I've noted, sir, that you still also want to speak from the Netherlands, but let's hear from our online community.
Yeah, I think these topics really resonate with our community. We have some comments, we have some questions. I'd like to bring to the floor immediately one question, which is directly to Gemma. And I think it goes, it continues your reflections. So it's a comment on EPALE from Marinos. He was talking about how to reach out to some of your learners. So he was talking about really digitally illiterate participants. So how do you attract these people who need the most from your training, when very often these to sign up and to these courses is online. Also, you know, all the communication on these courses is online. So how to reach out to these people who need it more? And he wanted also to know about your experiences with AUPEX.
Well, as I've said before, the challenge for us is to keep people in this kind of programs. But I think that is a very huge work from the profile of a digital educator. You need to know about technology and be aware of all the what's happening in the world. But we also have to this kind of feeling with people and reach them to understand what they need, because as I said, we know that people need to learn digital skills, but we also need to talk with them. So for them, having people in our workshops, we talk to them first in order to they have less fear about the digital impact of their life. So, for example, when I was in my digital competence center, I've been 13 years like an e-facilitator. Women came to me and said, I only use the computer to clean it. And I'm very afraid to touch it because I'm going to break it. So for me, it was a challenge to tell her, no, you're not going to break the computer if you touch it. And this is like a change of mind. And we approach with this kind of, I don't know, we have this listening of people. We listen what people want to achieve, and we reach for it. So,
thank you. Sarah, did you want to share something else from the online community?
We also have a question from directly for Joe this time about, and I have to ask my colleagues to put it on screen because I got disconnected, so I'm disclosing a little technical problem. But this question was directly to Joe and was asking about strategies to tackle the issues brought by general artificial intelligence. So if my colleagues can just put the question on screen so that Joe can read it out. So thanks a lot. Oh, maybe there is still. Yeah, just so I'll get it in a moment. Okay, here it is. Yes. Here it is. So it's from Tim. So maybe Tamsin, you can read it out.
Sure. So with Joe first, and then other members of the panel. You know, you mentioned that when TVs became ever present, there was a lot of moral panic that we would all become zombies and sit in front of TV, and our sort of brains would turn to liquid. And we've got similar fears about being passive consumers of AI generated content, and there's limited research in this area, but he's agreeing. So how do we approach this in a very practical way to make sure that learners work together with generative AI to solve problems and learn something new, instead of letting generative AI solve it and then copy paste it? And it comes back to what Luis said, which is there's technical skills and then there's the human skills that go with it, including context, analysis, organization of your information. So, and this is again comes back to the message that people said, well, AI won't necessarily replace jobs, but AI will support the way we do the jobs. So in an adult learning capacity, and maybe Joe, you can tell us historically, technology has always been around as a tool for it, and I'm sure we've always been concerned that it would replace learning. How do we make sure that AI, because it is so powerful and so easy to use, that it doesn't become the answer, it becomes a tool that people use to find the answer themselves? Joe, let me start with you, and Safa, I can see you nodding. I'll bring you in.
Yeah, so my message really would be First of all, it is about attitudes towards technology. So technologies, historically, there's lots and lots of instances where they've been framed in a way that takes away agency, that introduces a sort of technological determinism where the technology leads and society follows. And I think the first step is to say that's always been flawed, and that's flawed today, and that'll be flawed in the future as well. We always have agency and co-determination in how society integrates technologies, how we use them, how these are regulated. So just, I think the first step is just to say, actually, we do have agency. We have agency in artificial intelligence, which has a long history. And we had agency with television, and we have, you know, we shouldn't see us as passive consumers of technologies ever. We should always resist that framing. Secondly, I think that attitudes of institutions are important, and I think it's very encouraging, actually, that the you know, one of the things I'm really interested in is how the European Union, in particular, responds to things like movements like adult learning or civic education, and supports them through platforms such as EPALE, which I think it's wonderful to see a representative of the EU institutions, of the Commission here. I think that's really good, and we shouldn't, you know, in this community, never take that for granted. This is actually a really wonderful opportunity to kind of I mean, I think it highlights how receptive kind of EU institutions are to adult learning, which is fantastic. And I also think there's an importance in developing kind of cultures of learning, which is a really kind of tough thing to do. One last, I love giving historical examples, so I'll give one last one and then I'll shut up. But so in 58-63, there was one of the kind of projects that I'm studying is called the Metroplex Assembly, which was run by the Civic Education Center in St. Louis in the US. And it was a project of television civic education. You know, they're worried about the passive nature of TV. Everyone's turning into couch potatoes. How can we use television as an active participatory medium? And one of the great successes that that project had was in adopting a practice from adult learning called listening groups, which had been kind of organized around radio, you know, groups of friends or colleagues who would listen to a radio program and then have a discussion, a kind of organized discussion around it, and learning circles, which particularly come out of adult learning in Scandinavian countries. And, you know, by embedding their project in existing social networks, in existing social groups, bringing people together, their aim was to have a kind of empowering effect where, you know, people learn how to develop a culture of learning, how to kind of learn. And, you know, I think that something along these lines, you know, really paying attention to the learners, to kind of a co-determination, making sure that we always recognize we have agency. I think these are part of the solution. And then obviously, I would applaud the kind of receptiveness of the EU institutions and other kind of institutions at national level to support this, because I think that support is also really important.
Thank you. Safa, let me invite you to reflect on this. How do we not give over agency to AI, but make sure that AI is a tool that delivers to us, but it's not, we don't expect it to give us the answers?
Yeah, exactly. You know, in our work, you know, we create interventions, workshops, training of trainers, and we really like to lean into analog approaches to teach about technology. So rather than immediately sitting someone down in front of a screen, we sit in a circle and have a conversation, or maybe we play a game, or we, you know, there are so many different ways that we can talk about these topics all together, present in the space. And exactly, so that we can recognize and try to identify how technology as a tool can help us, and in what areas is it not going to replace us. So of course, for example, if I think in the example you brought up, I'm just imagining riffing off of that, if the final goal post is to say the answer and there's a right or wrong, then okay. But actually, if the final goal post is to explain your logic in how you got to thinking about this problem and why you would say that, and maybe also then contradicting yourself and saying, okay, well, what are the flaws also with my plan? You know, maybe that also opens spaces that are a little bit different. So rather than having there be like, you know, one truth answer, actually it's more about the logic and the critical thinking aspect behind the process.
Thank you. We're coming towards at the end of this panel. So let me just invite anyone on the panel who might like to leave a sort of final word with the audience. We started the day by sort of looking at the role of technology. And in this panel, we're particularly looking at the adult learning sector. What's the final message you'd want to leave us with? We heard from Joe, you know, it's not about technological determinism. We need to co-create, we co-own the space, you know, and to embed it back into social, cultural norms, into the process of learning. Hemi, you talked about, you know, the importance of engaging, listening to people, particularly women or groups who might have been outside. What are their fears? What are their constraints? What are their barriers? Start from there and change the mindset. Reframe the computer as something to dust and to be feared, to saying, what would you like to do with it? Where could it take you? And so this reframing of anything. Is there any last message that you want to share with us? Michael, we heard from the Commissioner and also from Anne that skills is going to be high on the agenda politically for the next 5 years. We've already had the year of skills. What's the final message any of you would like to leave our panel? Safa, I'm going to start with you.
So I think it kind of came up already, but just to say, critical thinking, I think, is the most important digital skill. So, you know, this is, of course, a skill that we want to make more robust in all areas and all sectors and types of learning. And critical thinking and digital technologies is no different.
Thank you. Hema, would you like to leave a final message with our audience?
Well, I would like to say that the digital skill impact in rural communities are very important to engage people. And this is my message. We need to learn about use technology just to empower ourselves, because technology is here, is with us, and we have to use it. So we need to be aware and be prepared to.
Thank you. Michael.
Yes, I would just like to stress that, and I agree. I think it came out a bit in the discussion that we're not losing the human skills. The human skills are still, even in the age of AI, they're extremely important, and of course they include what has just been mentioned: critical thinking, but also creativity, and all these things that the machines can't do yet. I mean, we will work alongside the AI, but the human skills will remain extremely important and central.
Thank you. Joe.
Yes, 100% echo the point on critical thinking. I think reflexivity as project managers, as policymakers, kind of really thinking about what we're doing, and if you know, we can be more flexible, and really emphasize co-determination with learners. So how do learners want to use the technologies, and how can we kind of support that?
Excellent. Can we say a warm thank you to our panel for this conversation? Thank you. So it comes to me to conclude our day, and on my script it says, you know, takeaways from the first day, and wow, it's going to be hard. That was incredibly rich, wide-ranging conversation, and I want to start with something that we heard from Annalisa about the way that the city of Bologna decided to put over the entrance to the city hall this idea that even if they didn't have the legal power to deliver citizenship, they made it a matter of principle that from day one you're included. And if we take that as a theme through today, we talked about the fact that it does matter the rules that cover a digital space. It matters who sets those rules and about accountability. And we explored the importance of freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And again, that they are different things. We talked on the importance of privacy, that you should be able to have different identities and be able to express yourself in ways that often the state has tried to control. The digital space has historically been seen as highly democratic because it's opening new possibilities, is also being used in many circumstances to limit, to cancel, and to exclude people. And we have to be aware of that, and we have agency and power to make changes, to be aware of it, and to raise those issues. We talked about the fact that, yes, the latest iteration of technology is all in our hands, but we have been surrounded for longer than I've been alive by technological change, and each of it, whether it was the radio, it was the telegraph, it was electricity, right through to the AI in our phone, we have had to adapt. And partly we've heard there was about reflexivity, asking questions, placing that technology in an understanding of the dynamics of the culture around it, a critical view of the sort of analysis of inequalities of power. And that is at the root of adult learning. Joe referred to the radical and emancipatory history of adult learning. And let's be very clear, it was at the root of the labor movement that advocated that knowledge was power. And if you had access to education, which was largely denied people in working in heavy professions, you couldn't exercise your rights. And as a woman, my right to vote came quite late. And part of the arguments against it were you weren't intelligent enough to process the information. You wouldn't be able to deal with complex issues, and the adult learning movement has broken down all of those walls and will continue to have to break down the walls in the future. And some of those walls will be linked to technology. Technology will create new out groups as well as new in groups, and the role of adult education as giving the keys to the kingdom, as to opening all of that, I think was demonstrated really well today. So I want to say a warm thank you to the many hundreds and possibly thousands of you who were online. I said you make this an event a smash hit with your questions and your comments. You have. Thank you to those of you here who sat so patiently and also participated and engaged. It was really a fantastic first day, and it's not over, because tomorrow we're going to be really looking at the hardcore economics issues. We're going to look hard in the eyes of poverty and see, how does adult education make a difference? Are we using it effectively? Is it still the key to moving forward? We've got, like today, great keynote speakers, panel discussions, and creative tools. But before I close, I just want to say, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from the more than 150,000 users on EPALE. We're curious, what's your experience like? How do you want to use it? Remember the example from Joe about the first huge machines that were to be used for educational purposes only, and people wanted to play video games. So, are we delivering what you want? Can we make it a better experience? What can we do to build and enhance your community? So there's a survey, and you'll be seeing a QR code for those of you on screen. Promise it's short, won't take longer than 5 minutes of your time. And we also, by the way, we're asking your experiences about this conference itself. So thank you very much for being here and for participating. The next 2 days are online, so I won't have the pleasure of having human faces looking in front of me, but I will remember what it looks like. I remember your faces. Thank you also to our fantastic technical team who are behind the scenes, but making it work. And for Sarah to be the voice of the online community here today. Thank you all. See you promptly tomorrow morning at 9:30.